Patterson Foundation
strengthens people, organizations, and communities by focusing on issues that address mutual aspirations, foster wide participation, and encourage learning and sharing.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Access for All podcast. I'm your host, Read Corley, podcast producer and consultant with the Patterson Foundation. Today we are speaking with Kathy Bisbee, Director of Alliance for Digital Equity. And this podcast is going to be a deeper dive into the topics that were discussed during the Digital Access for All webinar on September 4th, which you can find linked here or at the QR code here. However, you do not need to listen to that webinar to understand the content in this podcast. They will build off of each other. So after listening to this podcast, if you do want to go listen to that webinar, please do it. Kathy provides a lot of information there as well that she does not cover in this podcast today. In this podcast, we talk about some of the challenges of developing a statewide credentialing program for Digital Navigators and how that all came about. We talk about the importance of the Digital Navigators network that Kathy has been developing. And we also discuss some of the challenges involved in this work in rural communities. Awesome, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you would, please just start us off with a very brief introduction of who you are and your organization.
Sure. My name is Kathy Bisbee, and I'm the director of the Alliance for Digital Equity here in Western Massachusetts.
So we are talking with you today about Digital Access for All. You hosted a webinar that we are going to be linking to as well. So if anybody's interested in listening to that webinar, please visit the links down below. But Kathy, on this webinar, you touched on the creation of the Digital Navigator network the Alliance has formed. And we've also found that through our work with Digital Access for All, having a network of navigators is essential to communities here in our regions. What lessons from building this Mass Digital Navigators network could be applied to other regions?
There's so many lessons. I mean, I think there's a lot of us doing this work out there. So one of the biggest lessons I think we have had is listening, not just internally to our own network, but listening outside of our network as well. So, even just last week alone, in addition to the webinar with Patterson Foundation, I also had listening sessions myself with folks who are doing work around the country that's similar to our work. So understanding what is out there, how people are doing the work, hearing how we're similar and how we're different, and what makes each of our communities really unique, I think is one of the most important indicators of success, is listening both internally and externally. I think the second thing that I will say is, and applying those best practices as you're learning them. So thinking about how do you synthesize the information that you're gathering into the work that you're doing on a daily basis. I think thinking about where there are opportunities to collaborate is something we both do internally and externally as well. And I think that's been a big factor of our success, is that we have as you heard on the webinar, if you were at our webinar, we talked a lot about our facilitative leadership model. So we follow, and you can think of facilitative leadership as a lot of things like facilitation, leadership, but there is a particular methodology that the Interaction Institute for Social Change, who does work nationally and does a lot of work, I know, with food networks across the Southeast and across New England. They've sort of developed this methodology called facilitative leadership. And so I talked a lot about it as it relates to how we have built our coalition and how we built our network, because we've had the Interaction Institute's support as coaches to us as facilitative trainers, and we provided that training for our digital navigators. So I think that's been a really important part, not only for our team to be really well trained on how do we become the best facilitative leaders that we can be, but how do we also train folks inside of our network so that they can also train others in their networks? And I think that aspect of network weaving is really important both to our work, but I think it's important to the success of networks. And people do this in a variety of ways. Not everybody uses our model. In fact, I haven't heard of anybody outside of the Food Network work that the Interaction Institute for Social Change does that is doing this work specifically in digital equity. And so I think we're unique in that way. But I think there's some form of facilitative leadership that folks do in their networks as well, which is, networks are an informal and formal in all kinds of ways of, parts of life. We have social networks, we have political networks, we have moms networks, we have dads networks, we have all kinds of, we have cultural networks that we're using to do the work that we do all the time. We're collaborating, we're co-designing, we're co-creating with each other all the time. We just don't always call it a network. We don't always call it network weaving. So I think thinking about network weaving as we do from this facilitative leadership perspective has been one of the most important things that we've done in the last 2 years to really build the growth of our network. So I think really that last piece, the network weaving and the facilitative leadership piece, has been such an important part of our success. And what that's really queuing up for us for our next chapter is all of the branches, all of the nodes on our network are all ready to take action for the next chapter. And I think that's going to be really important to us. We had a meeting last week where we talked about working groups. How is our network going to take on working groups so that new work and the next chapter can happen? Because we're looking at funding cuts. We're all going to be affected by that. So how are we going to set up working groups that will enable us to keep working with each other no matter what? Because we know we can't be dependent on corporations, on businesses, on government, on the feds. We need to be sustainable in our own region. And so we're really working to do that in facilitative leadership, and that network weaving piece has really enabled us to empower everyone in the network to be a leader.
And so kind of digging a little bit deeper into that collaboration piece, what lessons have you learned about training, credentialing, and supporting navigators so they can serve effectively in these diverse communities?
Oh my goodness, where do I start? I mean, that is such a big question. So I know we're going to eventually do a podcast that's just about our digital navigators, and I hope to have them involved before I talk too much, because I think hearing it from the folks who are boots on the ground is going to be the best way to really answer this question. But I can tell you about the process that we undertook to get here, because I think they can speak better to the work that they're actually doing. And I can talk about the policy piece for sure. So when the Affordable Connectivity Program got cut federally, most of our organizations in our networks were geared to really help people get signed up for affordable internet. And that was really the focus, because that's something very tangible. We knew we could do that. We had funding to do that, to get access to the internet. And when that went away, there was a feeling in our community, what are we going to do? What are we doing if we're not doing that? We have funding. We want to help people. How can we best use the resources that we have to reach people? And so we met monthly with all of the folks who have been part of our Affordable Connectivity Program education and outreach team, which was about probably 30 folks around the region in all 4 counties of our Western Massachusetts region. And we said, here's some ideas we have, but we want to really hear from you guys, because we're not really sure how to proceed either. I think, and today I got asked on a call with my staff, well, what are we going to do? And I said, I don't know. And it's a really hard thing to say as a leader, to like say, we're in a world that like applauds authority. We're in a world that says, if you know the answer, then you'll be the leader. And that's not the world that I'm trying to create or be a part of. The world that I want to be creating is for leaders to be vulnerable and say, even if they have the answer, to be vulnerable and say, I don't know what the best answer is going to be for our group. The wisdom in this room is going to be able to come up with the best answer for our group. So instead of us looking to rock star champions, we are all a champion and we are all going to contribute to that. So that process started because Rachel Wilson, our grants manager, who was really leading that ACP network early on and had worked with them for about 6 months, really asked them questions. And she had me come on and I, we both asked them, what do you think the solution is? So we didn't impose a top-down structure right from the beginning. We said, we want to hear from you. We want to know, what do your folks who are doing this frontline work, what do they need? What kind of training do they need? What would be helpful that is a resource that we can provide? And so what came out of that, and I have a presentation where I was using for a while the, screenshots of our chats, because they were so great to see actual, I think I have some of these up. Yeah, I do actually. You want to see it?
Go for it.
So this is, as we were doing this work, and I'll make this as big as I can. Oh, it won't go big. There we go. We started talking about what is digital navigation. Let's see if this make it any bigger. There. So we asked people, what is, people are talking about digital navigation. What is it? Because NDIA had come up with kind of the language around this and defined it as a field around the time of the pandemic. And so we asked our folks in March of 2024, what does it mean to be a digital navigator? Do you even know what that means? What are you actually doing? So these are folks who are partners saying, these are things that we're doing as we were actually creating it. I think there's another slide in here too that so who is a digital navigator? Folks started talking about, we really want to make sure that it talks about repeated interactions. We really want to talk about the trust that we're building in our communities as digital navigators. We want to talk about the partnerships we have with libraries. We want to talk about civic participation and adding that as a social determinant of health as well. So that was really and then we had these Slido questions. You can cut the other stuff out of here, but we said, what kinds of digital navigator trainings would be most helpful for your team? And we did a Slido in the middle of the meeting. What should be included in a digital navigator's manual or toolkit? What do you want us to call our program? Is it digital navigation? Is it tech helper? Is it tech tutor? What do you want us to call this? And this is the kinds of things that they said in this conversation. And I think, this first meeting, we had about 20 folks, and then we started growing the network, and we got up at one point to about 50 people. But would you come to a person, in-person training? I mean, these are these little small things that I'm so glad I captured these moments, because when I look back, I realized that over the course of a year, these were the kinds of questions that we kept posing to the group, saying, what do you want? We hear this. We can provide this. What else do you want? What do you want to do together? How do you want to work together? What would be helpful to you? And I think so many times it's just people want to think that they have a solution that they can provide to people. And that gets in the way sometimes of a lot of really good discussion. And I know, because I'm guilty of this as a leader, I have to, and I'm very chatty. I have a lot of ideas, little neurodivergent. And so I have to remember to step back, and I have to create a container for space so that the people who are not coming up with ideas like I am come up with the ideas. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, they come up with things that I could have never thought of. And they come up with ideas that are directly related to their lived experience in their communities, right? Directly related to the day-to-day work that they're doing in their organizations, in their community. They're from those communities. And so getting this feedback from them in this really interactive way, I think that's also one of the reasons that the Navigator network in Western Mass really has been successful, because we did that early work to really understand and to really ask people what they needed and what they wanted. And some of it was very basic logistical stuff, and others was more related to, I'm going to stop sharing now, more related to how how they could transition from signing people up for internet access to doing more digital literacy, to doing more digital skill building, to maybe reaching people in programs that you hadn't thought about, like financial literacy, or in housing, like how they might do a program that wasn't just about signing people up for a government service, but was actually interacting with folks on a regular basis through these trusted, repeated interactions. So I would say that took us almost a year to build. It took time. And that is one of the things that I would say is one of the hardest things for people to remember, because, we're all under a lot of pressure. Our funders are telling us, what are the outcomes? When are you going to have the outcomes? Who's going to do what by when? And I'm all for that. However, the only way you're going to go fast is by going slow and making sure that everyone not only understands where we're going, but has been an integral part of creating that pathway forward.
Absolutely. Buy-in is extremely powerful, as is the wisdom of an entire group, much stronger than one individual's opinion. So you might have just answered this question as well, so feel free to repeat if you did, but what was the biggest challenge over developing this statewide credentialing program? Was it the time investment? Like, what is that biggest challenge that you guys faced?
Well, we haven't actually talked about the statewide credentialing program yet. So I'd love to give a frame for that. This is really the work of our Digital Navigator network that preceded the policy work that we've been doing. So I don't want to give the challenge until I've talked about what it is.
Okay, so would you please talk about what it is then?
Sure. Absolutely. So I would say last summer, towards the end of the middle of the summer, we saw that NTIA had a grant opportunity, like so many of us around the country who now are waiting in bated breath for maybe the possibility of it returning. But we saw this opportunity, and we knew that we have about probably 150 digital navigators in the state. And our network of digital navigators kept saying to us, we need to talk to other people who are doing this. So we need some cross training. We need some understanding of how other people are doing this in other regions. We need to be seen in our organization as people who are important and integral to the success of digital navigation. Which a lot of our DNs were entry-level folks who were coming in without a ton of experience, but had the really important soft skills and the communication skills and the just the lived experience of working with digital inequity themselves. And so we really wanted to make sure that they got the training that they needed. And so we started talking to other folks who were doing Digital Navigator training. We made our own Digital Navigator network training, a 3-day training on facilitative leadership last November, which 30 of them attended. Comcast was kind enough to give them all their own laptops, which was amazing. And we even did a press conference all together as a group about the importance of digital equity in the region. So there was all of these factors, I think, that came together around the same time as we also hired LaSherie Weems, who's our Digital Navigator coordinator for the Alliance. That was really helpful and essential in getting some of the structures in place for our Digital Navigators network. And our Digital Navigators, even a couple months after the network training, they started working together outside of the Alliance. And we did a survey about our Alliance members, and 78% of all of our Alliance members worked together outside of the Alliance meetings, which for us was a huge victory. The fact that you guys all are talking to each other without us being involved, that means we're doing our job. As facilitative leaders, we're not doing the work. We're connecting people to each other to do the work, and we're just helping to make sure that people have the resources and support and convenings and gatherings and facilitated events that they need, and going after funding to help support that as well. So I think what happened was, as we built our Digital Navigator network, as folks began to participate and build, we began to build a lot of leadership locally and regionally. Folks around the state started seeing that, and we started reaching out to them and finding ways that we would collaborate. We would learn about their programs. We would train our leadership team on some of the things that they were doing. And we realized that there was a need for a statewide Navigator network. And the navigators themselves said, we need a credentialing program. We need something, we're calling ourselves by this name now, but what does it mean really? We want our bosses, we want the executive directors who didn't come to the meetings, we wanted them to understand the importance of our roles. Because they didn't necessarily. They thought, oh, you're helping people, you're a front desk person who helps. But there's so many more skills, and there's so much more that goes into being a digital navigator. Which one of our digital navigators called, and I've been using it, is digital navigators are the community healthcare workers of technology. And CHW's community health workers was innovated in Massachusetts. We had 20 years ago a credentialing program in place. So there was a model for that we could follow. And we brought everybody together around the grant application. So we started having meetings. We started talking about what's in your interest, what's in our interest, how do we work together, what do we want to move forward? And we realized that what our digital navigators were saying and what their digital navigators were saying was, we want to be recognized. We want to be seen for this emerging field that we are the new workers, the frontline workers of. We want to be seen. We want to be amplified. We want our positions to be valued. We don't want to be the first to be let go, which was happening to some of them, right? So that really set the scene for us to bring digital navigators together. And we started really with the legislation that we put forward started writing it in December. And our representative, State Rep Sabadosa, was able to file that in January. And so we've been working on that for the last 6 months. And right now, in fact, today, we're having our first visioning meeting with our team to talk about what the first ever statewide Digital Navigator conference for the Mass DNA network is going to look like in May of 2026. So that process is going to be completely co-designed by the digital navigators themselves. So what we're doing right now is we are focusing our efforts and resources on training our team that works with the digital navigators with really exceptional facilitative leadership skills so that they can then start to convene a group of digital navigators who will act as a leadership team to not only organize the conference and be stipend for doing so. They need to be paid both travel and stipend for doing that work. And, have built it into our grants so that their bosses know that it's part of the work that we intend them to be doing with the grants, so that they have time and space to be able to contribute and really our digital navigators are going to co-design the conference and the credentialing program. So that's kind of how we got from there to here. And with the bill, we have a bill in the state legislature for a credentialing commission for digital navigators. We're also going to the governor, and we'd like to see it on her agenda. We think we have a chance, but who knows? With the goal being that it's a pretty low-hanging fruit. This is a small thing that you can do. That will enable a credentialing program to begin. We have already talked with community colleges. We've already talked with workforce development agencies. We're also partnering with our colleagues down in Pennsylvania to talk about what would it look like if we co-created a digital navigator certificate program, a credentialing program that we could pass at the state level. And there are other states that are also thinking of this. I think we're furthest along in policy, but least furthest along in credentialing. And part of that is exactly, and this is, I think, going to be the biggest challenge for us, honestly, is moving too fast. Like our team could probably sit down and write an amazing credentialing process right now, but that's not how we do things at the Alliance. And it's going to take more time. And we have to be patient with that process, because in the end, it's going to be so much better for those digital navigators who have been in it. It's not just buy-in. It's like it's really ownership. I don't want them to just think, oh yeah, that's a good idea, I can get behind it. I want them to say, this is my project, Kathy. I'm going to, like, even if you go take some other job, even if you go away, it doesn't matter, because there's a whole community of people who are going to fight for this, who are going to learn. They've been learning how to do advocacy so that they can fight for it at the state level. Most of our digital navigators had never done any advocacy before. They weren't political. They didn't see themselves. They weren't affiliated with any parties. They just knew that this affects my community. This affected my life. I was sitting outside of Dunkin' Donuts, during the pandemic, just so I could get internet. So my kids could go to school, or so that I could submit a job resume. I mean, these are stories that we hear from our DNs who have that lived experience. So they know what needs to happen. And, I think there's a whole bunch of other people we have to pull into the conversation that we're really working hard to do. One is businesses. Like, we need to make sure that they understand, if you want to get somebody on your customer service team that's going to help people with your telehealth portal, that's going to help somebody make sure they know how to use your product, or even know to not trust a phishing scam, and, know it's your product and not somebody else's product or somebody else's scam, it's in their bottom line best interest to make sure that digital navigation as a career path is credentialed, is clear, is part of our state process. And I want to make sure that, like, my dad, who's, 83-year-old vet living in a rural area, low income, writing books, having a great time on the internet. But I want to make sure that he has equipment that isn't going to crash every time he logs into Google Drive, which, real story, was happening. I want to make sure he has Zoom set up so that if he has problems, I can remote in and figure out how to help him. I want to make sure that if somebody comes over to his house and is helping him as a tech helper, and he gives them his Social Security information so that he can get his check online, because everything's switching to online for Social Security checks, I want to make sure that that person is trustworthy. I want to make sure that person has gone through some kind of a process, and I do not want it to be a burden. I don't want to create hoops for people. I don't think that's our intention at all. But we need to know that the folks who are getting trained to help our seniors, our most vulnerable populations, unhoused populations, folks in our communities who need our help, we want to make sure that they have some kind of credential that verifies that they have the skills and experience to do that. So those are some of the challenges that we have. And, again, going slow to go fast, that's going to be our biggest challenge. Getting funding, obviously we need funding to do this. We are going to create our Digital Navigator credentialing program as open source with Creative Commons licensing, so that anyone in the country can use it for their state as well. That is not the case with other programs that are out there. And my hope is that, because it's coming from digital navigators themselves, that other folks will consider using that as their credentialing program as well.
Well, that is a lot, and it sounds like the challenges are just beginning, but you've handled them well, and you understand, maybe we might move too fast. We need to take it slow a little bit, bring everyone along with us. We want true ownership in this, not just not just checking a box. I do want to adjust our conversation a little bit here. I remember during the webinar, you discussed that you're not really in the downtown area. You're more, I believe you said Western Massachusetts, or You're dealing with more things over there.
Well, it's an interesting place. So we are both urban and rural. And suburban, of course. So and I think you were asking a question in your email too about in terms of the barriers, the rural urban, it's challenging. I think, when we're in an area where we have a large city that is one of the most underserved zip codes in the entire state. Much more disparities than Boston, which is, 2 hours away from us. So we have an urban center that's 250,000 people that has unique problems and challenges and lots of health inequity and lots of digital inequities. We have In contrast, a rural area that has 100 people that is 2 hours just from us and like 3 hours from Boston, right? And when you put a digital navigator from the urban area and you send them out to the rural area, it is not an easy, especially in the winter where there's like snow and ice. And, we just had a tornado come through, which is atypical for us, that I drove through on Saturday. And I just thought about it. I was like, gosh, if I was going up to one of these other towns, like I wouldn't have been able to get through. Like it was towns in the mountains. And so it's a really interesting area because you do have like these really strong urban centers, and then you have really far away rural areas that, feel very disconnected from the rest of the state, that feel like, the folks on Beacon Hill in Boston at the state legislature do not listen to them, do not understand how far it is to go from one end of the county to the other end of the county. It's, for us in a small state like ours, things are 20 minutes away from each other, but not in these counties out here where, an hour away and an hour away through windy roads through the mountains, just much tougher. And a lot of them don't have broadband. So how do you get, hotspots that are going to work up there? How do you get equipment that's going to work up there? How do you fix the equipment? These are some of the challenges that we deal with, and a lack of understanding from central government in Massachusetts about the kinds of challenges that rural communities have. Franklin County is the most low-income community in our entire entire state. And there's so many inequities there and so many challenges. And so, that's something we've really tried to think about, like, how do we bridge some of those gaps when they're infrastructure based? Communities are far apart. You've got one library over here and then another library over there. How do we use the resources that are in place? How do we put people in those communities first? How do we organize on a hyper local level? So, all the folks in that county, how do we get them all together? How do we help them to support each other and provide resources? So yeah, the region is interesting and challenging for a lot of reasons.
Lots of barriers.
Yes.
Hopefully many solutions will be coming. And but to kind of wind this interview down here, how can those who might be listening to this podcast support this movement?
I will answer that, but let me give you one little tiny segue here first. One of the things that might not be obvious to folks from Florida, Massachusetts is an incredibly diverse state, both in land and in people. For example, the town that I live in here in Western Mass is Holyoke, and we have the largest population of Puerto Ricans outside of the island of Puerto Rico. So we have a huge Puerto Rican population that came, 100 years ago to work in the mills, and is, 55% of our town is Puerto Rican. So we have that. We have a lot of Puerto Rican community in Springfield as well. We have Russians, Portuguese, like all kinds of, folks coming from Haiti, Cape Verde. So really interesting mix. I think a lot of times people look at Massachusetts and they're like, oh, it's just like super northern, northeastern, waspy state, but it's actually a pretty diverse place, and lots of languages, lots of Vietnamese folks as well. So I just throw that out there because, folks from different regions don't always understand the cultural background and dynamics. So I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that about our region. In terms of helping us, I think obviously we're looking for collaboration. We're looking for funding. We are hoping that more folks will join forces to create the credentialing program together. But we're also really excited even about just hearing the day-to-day logistical and program specifics of other programs across the country. So we go to events like NDIA, their Net Inclusion event. We'll be presenting there probably this year again about coalition work. And we would love to just see the work of digital access as a whole be moved forward, both at the national and the federal level, but also that all of us be strengthened in our communities and in our region. Because I think the more we can work together, the more we can elevate this. I think it's really important to make it a nonpartisan issue. I think that having access to these tools and resources, it's not a luxury anymore. It's just part of the world we live in. And if we want people to be participating in our communities, if we want people to grow as leaders and take on when the baby boomers retire someday, we want to make sure that there's leaders who've really gotten the buy-in in their communities and know and have the skills and resources to be able to take those communities where they need to go. So we need for everyone to be able to have a voice at the table, have the skills, have the access to the jobs, the economic development, and education to really be able to, make this country even stronger.
Well, very important work that you are doing. I'd like to thank you for your time today. I know you said you had a busy day, so thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any last statements or words, now is the time. But Kathy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Reed. I really appreciate it. Thanks to the Patterson Foundation for having me. Please go to alliancefordigitalequity.com.org, either one. Find us on social media, and happy Digital Inclusion Week